We've given it away in a title because, you're here to take a look at QNAP network attached storage. But it's not really network attached storage. Network attached storage is the least important thing that it does. If you're new to level 1, you haven't really been, and you just clicked on this video, let me explain. It's not just network attached storage, it's basically a computer in a box, a Xeon in a box that's got form factors for M.2 storage, 3.5-inch storage, and 2.5-inch storage. It's the best of all worlds in terms of mechanical storage for bulk storage, flash storage, and also software support. It's basically a little server in a box. It goes far beyond network attached storage. You've got PCI Express expansion. You've got media encoding possibilities by deploying a GPU. Yeah, you can put a GPU, a video card, in a NAS. What sense does that make? Well, it's basically a little server in a box. Let's take a look. QNAP, secure data storage and backup. This does about everything that you would expect of a NAS to do. Data protection, private cloud, backups, surveillance, video cameras, for your home, your business. You're a power user, everybody's working from home, and I think that everybody working from home is even more than previously driving the impetus to have a home server. You've got laptops and mobile devices and phones and maybe cloud stuff, and in a small business, you might have an Office 365 subscription or a G Suite subscription. You need to be able to back that all up somewhere, but also quality of life. How cool would it be to have a captive portal on your guest Wi-Fi network so that when you sign up, you have a guest that comes and signs into your guest Wi-Fi network. They get a web page that's like, hey, here's all the cool stuff you can do in the house. Here's our Plex media server. Here's what the TVs are named in all the different rooms. Here's all this stuff. Here's the cameras if you need to be able to see if, the friend is coming from, and they're parking in the parking lot or whatever. You can do all that, and it'll run on an appliance like this. Yes, you can DIY it and you can build it. We've done videos on doing that kinds of thing as well. But QNAP has their custom operating system, QUTS Hero. It's not a super catchy name, but it does support ZFS. And ZFS is a really important file system if you really want the best in terms of data backup, data protection, and to be able to do easy replication between this device and another device. There are other technologies, but I'm partial to ZFS. This is the TS-h686. It's the 3.5-inch bay version. There's also the 886, which includes 2 more 3.5-inch bays if you need a lot of mechanical storage. Let's unpack. Now, right inside the box, you get a power cord. You get some Ethernet patch cables, a quick installation manual, and all of the screws that you need for mounting your 3.5 or 2.5-inch drives. So you get a ton of screws. You definitely want to save those because those are really low profile screws, and you don't want to lose those. There's also 2 tiny little heat sinks in there in the bag. They're peel and stick, and you can use those with your M.2. The really awesome thing about these peel and stick M.2 heat sinks is that a lot of the time with an M.2, the controller, the microchip that's the actual controller for the flash memory, is the thing that needs to be heat controlled. Whereas you don't want to heat control the flash memory, because flash memory to operate most optimally actually needs to be a little bit warm in a lot of cases. As you can see at the rear here, we've got a 250 watt power supply, so you're not going to be putting in a super high-end GPU. It's just enough for transcoding or something like that. Now it looks like we've got a ton of PCIe slots here, but we've actually just got 2 slots. One full-size double height slot, and then the other one is sort of a half height, half length slot. If you install the surveillance station software so that you can use this thing with IP cameras or video cameras or anything like that, you can install a video card and then have video out, and then this thing can plug into a monitor or a TV or something, and you can have your security cameras displayed on the TV by this thing. But out of the box, there's no video output. But we do have extra connectors, so if you get one of the fancy QNAP half height cards that combines 10 gigabit Ethernet along with M.2, you can put that in on this side and still have a full size PCI Express expansion slot on the other side. I really am not kidding when I say that this device is put together basically from like the level 1 fantasy wish list of a home network server, but it's in a small compact package. There are some trade-offs, but it's got a server class Xeon CPU. It has PCI Express expansion. I already said you can put a GPU in it. Can you run a virtual machine with PCIe pass-through? Yes, you absolutely can. This model is a dual core 4-thread. So that virtual machine that you're passing through the GPU, it's not going to have a lot of horsepower, but there are several models from QNAP that include higher end processors, higher end server class processors. You can even get these units with AMD processors, higher end AMD processors. Because this is a Xeon, it does support error correcting memory. This unit comes with 8 gigabytes of memory, but you can upgrade it all the way up to 128 gigabytes of memory. And upgrading is just like a computer. You pop the side off and you're good to go. In terms of other connectivity, there are 4 2.5 gig LAN ports and 2 USB 3 ports on the back. We've also got an extra USB 3 port on the front. So if you get like, a 16, 18, 20 terabyte external USB hard drive, and once a quarter you want to make an extra backup to an external hard drive and throw that in a bank vault somewhere, which is a pretty good backup strategy, you absolutely can do that. All of our connectivity at the front here is SATA, just in case you're a crazy person and you're going to try to repurpose some of those discount serial attached SCSI flash drives off eBay or something like that for your home setup or your small business setup. One reason that they might not have wanted to support U.2 NVMe at the front is because hot plug only just now started working. Like, we only just got the standard for NVMe hot plug working like 8 months ago, and like working well. I mean, there's been at least 20 or 30 BIOS updates from Dell to try to correct issues around NVMe hot plug, and mostly it seems like it's working at this point. But with this, if you do have an NVMe that dies, you'll have to shut the machine down and swap the NVMe. There's also something to be said for using NVMe that is designed for high write endurance, depending on how you're using it. If you're using it, what kind of cache you're using it for. This thing is an intelligent caching system. You can also use it as ZFS devices. So if you're using it as a ZFS device, then obviously you want to use something that's high endurance. You can use Optane. So something like Optane will have just a ridiculous, insane endurance. But there are SSDs that are built specifically for use in a NAS appliance that have a high write endurance. And there are also some enterprise grade SSDs that you can get in an M.2 form factor that will be able to have an endurance up in the petabyte range. SSDs like the SK Hynix P31 that I just reviewed, you can only write about 750 gigabytes to them, a little less than a petabyte before the thing is completely worn out. We'll talk about that in another video just in general, because that's just something to be aware of when you're doing an SSD for cache. Generally, you don't want to use a cheap SSD for caching. And finally, the last port is this weird little 3.5mm audio jack. So this is a serial port that you can use for debugging or whatever, but there you go. One thing that I like right away, got room for an optional second blower fan and a second 4-pin fan header. So it comes with the one installed, which is going to give plenty of airflow, but if this PCI Express by 8 half-height slot, you're going to put something in that gets really, really warm, well, I'm sure that QNAP has a second fan accessory kit that you can order online, but this is actually a pretty standard Delta fan, so you don't even have to get it from QNAP. You can just get a 4-pin blower fan and you're all good. Even though blower fans can be loud, one thing I should mention about the blower fan design here is that mostly it runs at a low RPM. So this thing is quiet enough for you to sit it on your desk and not really be aware that it's in the room running all the time. Now let's talk for a second about ZFS. If you're going to use ZFS with this NAS, that's first of all a unique feature. Most NAS don't do ZFS. I mean, when you buy this, a little bit of a premium price, like I said, but it's basically a Xeon D. I mean, you're getting basically a full computer with a custom operating system. So this is not really like a NAS. It's more like a small server, really, than a NAS. They do themselves a disservice calling it a NAS. ZFS is a complicated, combination file system volume management thing. See, what RAID 6 is you've got 2 drives worth of redundancy. So if any one drive is failing, the other drives can look at it and say, okay, we've got enough information to know what this should have been. Technically with RAID 6, any 2 drives could die, but if 2 drives die, if the information is a little bit corrupt on the remaining drives, you'd never know. The only reason you know with RAID 6 is because you got an extra drive of redundancy. You got to really know what kind of failure modes RAID or ZFS guard against. And ZFS, you've got RAID Z, which is not RAID in the traditional sense, RAID Z1, 2, 3, which is just the level of redundancy that you want. But ZFS also supports mirroring. So with this, because you have 4 drives, you could do a mirrored stripe, which would be insanely fast, very low RAID Z overhead. Your total usable capacity would be 2 drives worth of storage. Or you could do RAID Z1, where you've got 1 drive worth of parity and 3 drives worth of capacity, or you know, you can do RAID Z2 where you're in the same situation. You can do RAID Z3, which is actually not something I would recommend with this enclosure. You should just do a 4-way mirror in that case instead of RAID Z3 with just one drive, because it'll just be 4 copies on 4 physical disks if your stuff is that important. Then you've also got the 2 3.5 inch drive, which you can use for caching or a separate log or L2 ARC or some combination of devices like that. But that's gonna have to be another video. So that's enough about looking at the internals. Let's get some drives in this and take the software for a spin. The best way to explain ZFS really is to think about a single mechanical hard drive. A single mechanical hard drive is what stores all of your information. And if it dies, it takes all of the information with it. It's basically an unrecoverable situation. And a lot of weird things can happen right before it dies. Like it can lie to you, it can be silently corrupting your information. You don't know. The easiest way to think about what you can do to guard against that is to have a mirror. You've got 2 drives that are basically exactly identical. And if the information gets corrupt on one and it dies, you can read the information from the other one. The problem is, if you've got a typical NAS that has a mirrored configuration, if both drives are working, but one of them is lying, there's no way to know that the information, like which set of information is actually good. Because the system that manages storing the files, the file system, is separate from the thing that manages multiple physical disks. They don't work together. Like the file system isn't even aware that it's running on a device that's not a real physical piece of hardware. ZFS combines the physical device management aspect of that along with the file system aspect of that, and it stores extra checksum information. So basically, unless the drive returns exactly the right information, ZFS knows which drive contains the original correct information, which is pretty awesome. Even if the drive is lying all over the place, the mathematical chances of producing the exact checksum necessary to fool ZFS is very, very small. It's not going to happen. And this platform supports error correcting memory, which is important but not critical for ZFS, and all sorts of other fun, cool ZFS features. So with ZFS, if you have 2 drives and you have a mirror, ZFS absolutely knows when one of the drives is working but lying, and it will tell you, hey, this drive is having a lot of errors. I'm going to take it offline. You don't really get that with any other mirror type configuration. You don't really get it all the way up until RAID 6. And some, but not all, RAID 6 implementations will do that. All right, now I've got everything set up in another room and we're ready to install this. So it's just install.qnap.com and it'll take you to where you need to be, which is on your sticker. So that's for a cloud-based installation. If you don't want to do a cloud-based installation or you're going to put it on a separate LAN, you totally can do that. You can download QFinder Pro, which is right here, and then you'll be able to do that. Don't mind me, I'm just folding in the background. One thing that I do think deserves a quick mention is if you do use the offline configuration utility, QFinder Pro, Windows, Mac, yeah, of course, Ubuntu, and the Chrome Web Store. Nice. Now, when you first access the QNAP over the web with the interface, whether you use the QNAP Pro or whatever tool, you log into it, you get a web interface. You get block-based snapshots to protect your data, and it explains a lot of what you're working on through the GUI. And so it sort of tells you a little bit about what's going on. When you finally do get to the device setup wizard, though, it really refers to things as like RAID 1, RAID 5. It is actually talking about ZFS. And so with the 3 drives that I've added here, you could set it up as a 3-way mirror or RAID Z1, which is what I've opted for. Also, virtualization. Getting this set up with VMware is pretty easy. You just need the vSphere plugin. Can't talk enough good things about virtualization. Using this as a backing store for VMware or Hyper-V, you can expose it as NFS or iSCSI, and you can still deal with, block-based snapshots or more advanced, file share-based snapshots using ZFS's built-in snapshotting facility. But it's still a really high-performance implementation because they're not really, they're doing it the right way. They're not really bolting together a bunch of different, not quite compatible approaches for dealing with this. And also, with VMware listed here and an official VMware supported solution, looks pretty good. You even get a help screen for iSCSI over RDMA. So RDMA is nice because it's relatively low overhead. It takes some of the networking overhead and shoves it into hardware, so you get lower latency connections, more throughput. And for extra security, you can lock this down with 2-factor. So as long as the QNAP can phone home, you can enroll in 2-factor so that nobody can log on to the NAS unless they have your 2-factor authentication method. So
Could use SMS messages or Google Authenticator, a couple other ways. But it's nice to see that feature. That's been a quick look at the QNAP TS-h686, but you know, using it and the software set and all of the stuff that's running here under the hood, I can't help but look up the stack at the TS-h686. You got 2 more cores in your processor, double the memory out of the box, more 3.5-inch drive bays. You get the same 2.5-inch drive bays and the same M.2 expansion capabilities. It's a little beefier unit for only a couple of $100 more. I think that I would, or less than a couple of $100. Actually, a Newegg, it's even less than that. I think if it's a choice between the 686 and the 886 and not knowing exactly where I'm going to go, if it's going to be a device that I want to use for the next 5 years, I think I'm going to go with the 886 over the 686. The 686 is not bad. I mean, it's a Xeon, it's ZFS. ZFS is a huge win here. ZFS is a whole other thing that I could talk about endlessly, but I don't think it's really accurate to call these NAS devices. This is more like, you know, a small server in a box, and you combine that with the ability to run applications. This can be your small business server solution with good backups and good offsite replication capabilities. I mean, ZFS Send is a robust ZFS feature for doing replication that is a relatively low overhead, fast replication option between NAS devices. It's a much better option than something that's based on rsync or something that's based on, you know, keeping track of changed blocks or whatever. That's a feature that's built into ZFS. It's no extra work. It's really awesome. So I think I would use the TS-h686 as kind of an offsite appliance. The 886 I think is going to be a better choice, especially if you're running containers, you know, things like Docker and maybe Nextcloud, the only office stuff so that you can run your cloud office stuff. Pretty much anything that is a mixed workload. If you're just doing surveillance or 1 or 2 applications, yeah, the 686 is going to be fine. I mean, this is Xeon D. It's 2 cores, 4 threads, but you know, QNAP has even higher end solutions. You can get more CPU horsepower, more memory, whatever it is that you're going to look at in terms of the other models. It's just the price points between the 686 and the 886 are so close that spend a couple $100 extra bucks and get an extra year or 2 of usability, I think, with all of the possible upgrade paths that you have with the 886. But you know, both of these are whisper quiet. Both of these would not be out of place on your desktop, and it is nice to see, you know, a company like QNAP that is providing commercial support for all of this open source stuff. To a lot of companies, that commercial support, being able to pick up the phone, having a qualified solution, having a commercially qualified ZFS solution, that's worth the price of the chassis. I mean, you can DIY that. There are options that you've got for doing more DIY stuff, but overall, the package here and the, you know, the QNAP experience, I've got to admit, is pretty nice. They package their applications, they made it point and click easy. You don't have to be a gearhead to deal with it. I've had a pretty good time messing around with this. And ZFS. I love ZFS. ZFS really is an incredible piece of engineering. I can't say enough nice things about ZFS. It's not perfect for all use cases, but that is being worked on. So, I'm Whittle, this is Level 1. I'm signing out, and I'll see you later.